Welcome to Lord Nightmare channel. We share scary stories with rainy ambience. I hope this video helps you in some way to sleep, relax, or just be entertained for a while. If you enjoy it, please think about subscribing and hitting the thumbs up button to help my channel out. Now let's begin.
The time my Facebook doppelganger tried to take over my life. I've never been much of a Facebook user, just the occasional scroll or update. But last year, something happened that I can't explain, something that still makes me feel uneasy every time I think about it. It started with a friend request. At first, I thought nothing of it. But when I clicked on the profile, I froze. It was me. Same profile picture, same name, same cover photo, even the same posts. Everything about this account mirrored mine, almost perfectly. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of mistake or a prank. Maybe one of my friends was messing with me. I accepted the request, mostly out of curiosity, but the moment I did, my phone buzzed with a message from the account. "Hi," it said. I replied, "Who is this?" They responded almost immediately, "It's me." "Who are you?" Something about the way they worded it felt tough. I laughed nervously and typed, "Very funny. Who's behind this?" Their response sent a chill down my spine. "You're the one pretending to be me." For a second, I thought about ignoring it altogether, but I couldn't help myself. I typed back, "Stop this. Seriously, who are you?" The next message came after a long pause. "I'm you, and I want my life back." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. This had to be a joke, right? Some kind of elaborate prank? I showed my phone to a couple of friends, hoping one of them would crack a smile and admit it, but they all seemed genuinely confused. "That's so creepy," one of them said. "You need to block them." So I did. But that night, as I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, I got another notification. This time, it wasn't from the fake account. It was from my own profile. It said, "Your password has been changed." I bolted upright, my heart pounding. I hadn't changed anything. I tried logging into my account, but I was locked out. Somehow, they'd taken over. I scrambled to reset my password through Facebook's recovery system. After what felt like hours, I managed to regain access. When I finally got back in, my profile was different. My bio had been changed to read, "I'm watching you." My cover photo was a blurry, dark image of what looked like my own bedroom. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my profile. The posts I'd made were gone, replaced by a series of eerie messages. "You don't deserve this life. I'll take it from here. Let me in." I deleted everything, changed my password again, and set my account to private. But that wasn't the end. Over the next few days, I started getting random friend requests from strangers, dozens of them. The messages from these profiles were cryptic, like, "We're coming" and "Do you remember?" The scariest part happened about a week later. I was going through my camera roll when I found a photo I didn't recognize. It was a picture of me, taken from outside my bedroom window. I don't know how it got there. I live alone, and my phone is always with me. I deleted the photo and spent the next few nights sleeping with all the lights on. Eventually, the strange messages stopped, and the fake account disappeared. But I still don't know who or what was behind it. Was it a hacker? A stalker? Something else entirely? I've since stopped using Facebook altogether. I don't trust it, or any social media, for that matter. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, is watching. So, have you ever experienced something like this? Let me know in the comments or send me a message. I'd love to hear your story, if only to know I'm not alone in this. And if you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more creepy tales. Who knows what other dark corners of the internet we'll explore next? The stranger who found my address. Back when I was a freshman in high school, something happened that still gives me chills to this day. I was young, naive, and like many teens, I was all about making new friends on social media. Little did I know how dangerous it could be. It started innocently enough. I got a friend request on Facebook from a guy who seemed around my age. His profile looked normal. A few pictures of him hanging out with friends, some mutual connections, and his school listed just one town over. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Curious, I accepted. Almost immediately, he sent me a message. "Hey, thanks for accepting my request." He seemed friendly, so I replied, and soon we were chatting casually. Over the next day or two, our conversation grew more frequent. He seemed nice enough, though looking back, there was something off about how eager he was to talk. Then, on the third day, he asked if I wanted to hang out. I hesitated. Sure, we'd been chatting, but I didn't know him. I politely declined, saying I wasn't comfortable meeting in person just yet. He seemed to take it well, responding, "Maybe next time," and we kept chatting. The next day after school, though, things took a weird turn. "I'm outside," he messaged me. Confused, I replied, "What do you mean?" "I'm at your house." "Come up," he wrote back. My heart skipped a beat. How did he know where I lived? I had never told him. I peeked out my bedroom window and saw an old, red sedan parked across the street. Its windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see who was inside. My stomach knotted with unease. I messaged him back, saying I couldn't come out. He was insistent, though, sending message after message. "Come on, I drove all the way here. Just for a little while. Don't make me wait." I didn't respond. Instead, I stayed inside, watching as the car sat there for what felt like hours. Eventually, it drove off, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. That night, I couldn't focus on homework. My mind kept circling back to that car and the strange guy I'd been talking to. I decided I wouldn't message him anymore, but he beat me to it. "Why didn't you come out?" he asked. I ignored him, but he didn't stop. "Are you home now?" My hands were shaking. I wanted to block him, but before I could, my phone buzzed again. "You're in your room, aren't you?" I froze. How did he know? My bedroom light was on, and my blinds were only slightly open. Feeling sick, I glanced outside, and my heart dropped. The red car was back. This time, it wasn't just parked. It was slowly cruising down the street, stopping directly across from my house. My breathing quickened as I watched. After a moment, the driver's door opened and a man stepped out. But it wasn't a teenager. It was a grown man, easily in his 40s, maybe older. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie, and he started walking toward my house. I bolted out of my room and ran to the living room, where my parents were still awake. "There's a man outside," I blurted, panic evident in my voice. My dad immediately got up and went to the front door. By the time he opened it, the man was only a few houses away. When my dad called out to him, the man turned, stared for a moment, then started walking faster. "Hey!" my dad shouted, stepping outside. That's when the man took off running. My dad didn't chase him, but he stayed on the porch, watching as the man disappeared into the night. His car, however, was still parked across the street. We called the police. When they arrived, they checked the car and eventually found the man nearby, hiding in some bushes a few blocks away. It turns out he didn't even live in our town. The police arrested him, but they never gave us a clear explanation of how he found me or why he was pretending to be my friend online. That experience taught me a hard lesson about social media. You never really know who you're talking to, and sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry. This happened a few years ago when my wife and I had just moved into our home. We live in a peaceful neighborhood surrounded by trees and open spaces, the kind of place where people don't even lock their doors most nights. Our house has a sprawling backyard that fades into a dense forest, and we loved the tranquility it offered, until something strange and terrifying happened. Our neighborhood has a Facebook group where people share updates about local events, lost pets, or suspicious activity. Most of the posts are harmless, yard sales, weather photos, or announcements about the annual barbecue. But one afternoon, I came across a post that sent chills down my spine. It was about a man spotted near the woods at the edge of our community. The post described him as disheveled, with long, greasy hair and a scruffy beard. Someone had seen him walking out of the forest and trying to flag down cars near the main road. Another neighbor claimed he tried to open their car door while they were stopped at a red light. The police had been called, but by the time they arrived, the man had disappeared back into the woods. Reading the description, my heart sank. The forest they were talking about backed directly onto our property. Out of curiosity and a bit of paranoia, I decided to check the woods myself that evening. Armed with a flashlight, I ventured out along the faint trail that meandered through the trees. The further I went, the thicker the foliage became, and soon I was in a part of the woods I'd never explored before. The air was eerily quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves. After about 20 minutes, I came across something unexpected, a small clearing. In the center was a makeshift campsite. There was a tarp strung between two trees, a smoldering fire pit, and scattered trash, empty cans, wrappers, and an old, tattered blanket. My chest tightened. Someone had been living here, and judging by the still warm embers, they weren't far away. I quickly made my way back to the house, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that I was being watched. I told my wife what I'd found, and we decided to keep an eye out for anything unusual. That night, as we were settling into bed, the motion-activated light in our backyard flickered on. My wife nudged me, whispering, "Did you see that?" I got up and peered out the window, expecting to see a deer or maybe a raccoon. Instead, my breath caught in my throat. A man was standing at the edge of the yard, just where the forest began. It was him, the man from the Facebook post. He was standing completely still, staring directly at our house. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then, as he took a step closer, instinct kicked in. I grabbed my phone and called 911 while whispering to my wife to stay quiet. The operator assured me that officers were on their way. Meanwhile, the man continued to approach, moving slowly but deliberately. He reached our patio and tried the back door. Thank God we had locked it. Frustrated, he peered inside, his face just inches from the glass. My wife stifled a gasp as he began tapping on the window. Then, as if he'd heard something, he turned abruptly and ran toward our shed at the far end of the yard. I could see the beam of a flashlight cutting through the trees. The police were arriving. They surrounded the shed, shouting for the man to come out. For several tense minutes, there was silence. Then, suddenly, the shed door creaked open, and the man emerged, hands raised. He looked wild, his clothes dirty and torn. The officers took him into custody, and one of them came to speak with us. Apparently, the man had been living in the woods for weeks, possibly longer. They found more belongings in the shed, including a notebook filled with ramblings about watching people in the neighborhood. The officers suggested we install more security measures and avoid venturing into the woods alone for a while. After that night, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. We installed cameras and motion sensors around the house, but I still couldn't sleep well for months. To this day, I wonder how many times he might have been watching us from the trees before we ever knew he was there. A few years ago, I moved into a new apartment in the city. It was a small one-bedroom, one-bathroom place on the second floor, tucked at the end of a long hallway. It seemed like the perfect place to start fresh. For the first few weeks, I barely saw anyone in the building. The hallways were quiet, and I didn't think much about the neighbors. But then, one evening, after about a month of living there, I got a random friend request on Facebook from a guy I didn't recognize. We didn't have any mutual friends, so I thought nothing of it and declined it. The next day, though, he sent another request. This time, he also included a message. "Hey, I'm your next-door neighbor," he wrote. Now, I was a little confused. I didn't recognize him, and I had never seen him around. Still, I accepted the request, thinking it might be a friendly gesture. We started chatting, and he mentioned he had seen me around the building. But that didn't add up. If he was my neighbor, I'd never seen him. He seemed nice enough at first, but the more we talked, the stranger things got. He would message me out of nowhere, asking what I was doing, how my day was, and even what my plans for the weekend were. It felt like he was trying a little too hard to get to know me. I chalked it up to just being friendly. Then one day, things took an eerie turn. I had gone out of town for the weekend to visit family. When I came back, I got a message from him almost immediately. "How was your trip to your parents?" he asked. I froze. How did he know that? I hadn't mentioned it to him, and I was sure I hadn't posted anything about it. He just casually replied, "Oh, I just guessed." But something about it didn't sit right with me. A few nights later, things escalated. It was late, around 11 p.m., and I was getting ready for bed when I saw his name pop up on my phone again. "What are you doing?" he messaged. I ignored it and went to sleep, too tired to deal with it. But then my phone started buzzing. Several messages came through in quick succession. "I know you're home," one of the messages said. "You need to answer me now." I tried to brush it off, but it felt strange. So I responded, asking if everything was okay. He told me he needed to talk and that he wanted to come over. I told him I was tired and that I was about to sleep, but he kept sending more messages. "Please let me in," he begged. "I really need to talk." I told him no and tried to go back to sleep, but it didn't stop. The messages kept coming. Finally, I turned my phone off and tried to ignore it. But as I was lying there, trying to sleep, I heard loud knocking at my door. My heart dropped. I peeked through the peephole. There he was, standing outside, banging on my door, demanding I let him in. And his messages? There were more now, at least 20, all begging me to open up. I was starting to panic. I yelled through the door, warning him that if he didn't leave, I'd call the police. He didn't back off. I quickly dialed 911, explained what was happening, and they told me help was on the way. When the police arrived, he was still there, knocking and shouting. They managed to arrest him after he tried to resist. He was acting erratically, and I honestly don't know what his deal was, but I'm just thankful I didn't open the door for him. That night, I learned a tough lesson about trust and privacy. The guy may have seemed harmless at first, but it quickly became clear that he had crossed a line. I was lucky things didn't get worse, and I'm so glad I trusted my instincts. Have you ever had an experience with someone you thought was friendly, but then things took a weird turn? Or maybe you've had a situation where someone seemed to know way too much about you. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. And don't forget to share this video if you think it might help someone stay safe. Stay cautious, everyone.